Welcome to the Vision by Protiviti podcast. I'm Joe Kornik, Editor-in-Chief of Vision by Protiviti, a global content resource looking to the future to examine big themes that will impact the C-suite and executive boardrooms worldwide. Today, we're exploring the Metaverse and its impact, and I'm excited to be joined by Luke Franks. Luke is an advisor, speaker, and presenter who has fronted shows for ITV, BBC Radio 1, and Sky, as well as branded content for the likes of Netflix, Amazon, and Spotify. He hosts the hugely successful, and I might add outstanding, Welcome to the Metaverse podcast, where he interviews some of the brightest Metaverse minds each week. Recently named one of the top Metaverse thought leaders and content creators worth following, Luke's insights have been featured on Vice, the BBC, Talk Radio, and in The Athletic. I'm so happy to have him here with us today. Luke, thanks so much for joining the Vision by Protiviti podcast.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Luke, I'm turning the tables a bit on you here, as I know you're usually the one asking the questions. And let me just start by saying I absolutely love your podcast and your takes on the future of internet culture, Web3, and the Metaverse. I've spent a lot of time listening over the last several months to your Welcome to the Metaverse podcast. I've learned a ton by listening, and you're obviously a big believer in the Metaverse, and it's almost unlimited potential, it seems. It's impacting nearly everything we do. So let me ask you why? Why do you believe in the Metaverse? Why do you think it's sort of a can't miss?
Yeah, no, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate it. And we're at a really interesting time. I think what's really happening here is a combination of trends that are all colliding at the same time or about to. And we're also at a point where I think there's enough evidence and enough kind of network effects to sort of confirm this fundamental shift. And that's happening in a couple of ways. I think the first is a move towards a more immersive experience of the internet. So from primarily kind of a 2D experience that we're all familiar with on websites and scrolling on our phone and that kind of thing, to a more 3D experience in immersive worlds, probably as avatars as we go and explore these new places and spend more time there and socialize there. And we'll talk about more of that in a second. So there's the experience kind of shift that is happening. And then there's also this native kind of digital ownership layer, which is really crucial to what's happening as well. And that's kind of the Web3, the blockchain, the sort of NFT component that's in its early days really as well. So, we're certainly not there at that full vision yet, but there's plenty of work to do. And, there will be still, and there has been obviously, lots of failures along the way, plenty of volatility, skepticism, all very normal with kind of a big technological shift like this. And I see it really as not dissimilar to the adoption of the internet the first time around, a new kind of fundamentally game-changing technology that went through these cycles, human cycles of fear and greed, boom and bust, but ultimately sort of completely changed all of our lives in varying degrees. So I think that's where we are now. We can kind of dive into that in a bit more detail as we go.
I'm curious, though, when it comes to its overall sort of global economic impact. I mean, the forecasts are sort of all over the map, right? They range from somewhere around $1 trillion, US, all the way up to like 15 trillion by the decade's end. Where do you see the Metaverse in terms of its global economic impact by, let's say, 2030?
These huge numbers get thrown around. Obviously, a lot is kind of hard to quantify, but it's to do really with the scale of what's happening here. So, if we look at some evidence, what's happening in a new sort of parallel digital economy and what the next generation are growing up with as well, what they're native to. So Roblox is a good example. And Roblox, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm sure plenty of people do, is a virtual world, right? You go in, you choose an avatar, and you go and explore various kind of mini worlds and mini games, and kids are going there to kind of socialize and hang out. All the things that when I grew up with the internet, I would wait on MSN of an evening, waiting for my friends to come online and sort of chat to me. Now kids are avatars and they're hanging out and socializing and playing in these virtual worlds. And if you're a parent, you'll probably know, because your kids will be asking you to buy Robux vouchers so that they can go and buy digital fashion items for their avatars in these worlds, things that they care about. They care what they wear and look like there. But yeah, if we look at some evidence, I mean, Roblox has about 50 million users a day, which is pretty wild. That's, a big number. And the most visited experience has been played 30 billion times now, just recently, which is pretty wild when you think that the most watched YouTube video has been watched 11 billion times. So the next generation are already in this virtual world, hanging out there and, going back to play with their friends there. And as I say, like, kids massively value their digital identity there. $1 billion plus is spent per year on this. So kids buying kind of fashion items and this sort of thing. over half of all US kids play Roblox every week. So, that's one example of what's happening. Fortnite is another kind of a blend of gameplay and social virtual worlds. A good example there when we're thinking about like the scale of this digital economy is virtual events that happen there. So there was a gig, a rapper called Travis Scott did a virtual show as an avatar there. 12 million people attended because it was rolled out across the globe at various different times. And he reportedly netted about $20 million from those performances, which was the equivalent of doing about 10 back-to-back physical arena shows for him as an artist. So you can begin to understand this kind of scale of digital assets and experiences around the world in these virtual worlds. So, next generation are growing up natively to all of that. They understand that straight away. If we're thinking about the sort of transition of these stages of the internet and where we're going, people talk about Web 1 as the sort of read-only layer of the internet, the kind of you'd hit a website and get back information. People talk about Web 2 as the sort of read and write layer where we were able to edit and send information and have things like social media and Wikipedia, this kind of group knowledge, on the internet that we could edit. And now we're going towards what people are calling Web3, this sort of ownership layer in these digital assets at scale. So yeah, that's the key thing is the scale of this is where these valuations are coming from, because it's a pretty big shift.
Right. And you talked a lot about gaming there. And clearly I think gaming has been the big winner so far on the metaverse, or the big entry point for most, especially from a generational standpoint, right? It's been the way that the metaverse has really grown. Obviously with Vision by Protiviti, I mean, we're focused on how, business leaders and people much older than those people essentially playing games, or at least most of them, will be using the metaverse. So I'm just curious, are there business lessons to be learned from the success that gaming's had in the metaverse? I mean, how do you sort of see that from a business leader's perspective? What can they glean from the success of some of those companies you just mentioned?
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of this does come from gaming roots, right? And, gaming is the biggest entertainment industry on the planet, bigger than music and film put together. Interestingly, as well, the average age of a gamer is around 31. So there is this younger Gen Z generation growing up native to it, but there's also a slightly older generation who spend a lot of time playing games as well. But, when we look at the metaverse now, your brands can fit in there. I think there's also an interesting distinction between gaming and gamification as well, right? We can take some of the things that work in gaming and kind of bring them into this new, more immersive world. So, I'll use Roblox again because there's a lot of evidence there. But a company, a brand who've done it really well, Nike have built Nike Land in Roblox, and it's really interesting because you can go and experience a whole world. They've brought their brand in. And it's kind of a sports themed universe, right? A sort of Nike Disneyland, if you like, where you can go and play, socialize. You can go and collect coins. And there's little gamification mechanics inside that world that keep people coming back. That's why the stats are so big in that world. People want to come back and they want to unlock these things and kind of level up and stuff like that. So, for a brand who's looking to sell their product, whether it's natively digital or whether it's something that starts digital that can then also link to a physical item as well, or whether it's a marketing play or whatever it is, thinking about these gamification kind of loops and hooks, and customers spending more time in a brand world is a really attractive thing. It's a way to kind of really engage people in a new way. There's lots of kind of interesting examples there. H&M have done it well recently, allowing users to go and co-create with some of their items, the digital fashion items in this world. Chipotle did kind of a maze in Roblox as well, so people had to kind of unlock things and even kind of legacy artists as well. People like Elton John are beginning to reinvent themselves in this new explorable world for a new generation and a new audience. So it's a big opportunity thinking about it in that way.
Yeah, so interesting. I mean, I think one of the most exciting aspects of the metaverse is sort of the emerging technologies that enable it, and all the new things happening. I mean, you mentioned some of them there. When you look at it, what are you most excited about?
At the minute, a lot of the experiences are on devices that we know, right? So, on a desktop computer, on a mobile, that's where people are. That's where everybody obviously has a mobile in their pocket. So, being able to kind of interact with these worlds in a familiar way is where we are now. We're seeing more consumer VR headsets begin to roll out. So, Meta's Quest 2 has been the one that's been the sort of triumph, where it's been actually making its way into homes that outsold Xbox in 2021 for the first time ever. So we're beginning to see that finally VR sort of have a piece of the pie in a consumer way. There's rumors around Apple releasing their mixed reality headset. So the kind of augmented reality layer of stuff, I think will get really interesting next year, where it'll be a headset, but you'll be able to see the physical world as normal and kind of add layers of reality on top of that, which I think is interesting. So they're kind of happening slowly, and that's growing as well. AI has really come into the public consciousness recently with things like ChatGPT, because it's so tangible. You can go and use it, and that's a whole separate conversation on its own. But we're at sort of the 0.001% of what AI can do, how it's revolutionizing sort of workflows. If you've not played with ChatGPT, just Google it and go on it, and you can ask it anything. It's like having an assistant that has a hive mind of all the knowledge in the world, and you can begin to get it to think about SEO for you or come up with a business plan. And then you have the art tools where you can create these incredible art pieces and things like that. It's and I think that all plays into this bigger trend of more immersive worlds that we're shifting to. When we think about going into these worlds, we're going to need the content there, and users will build some of that, and AI tools will help build that. We're going to need a lot of content. It's going to need to be immersive and fun and constantly kind of updated, and AI has a role to play there as well. But yeah, so that's all happening. I think it'll be interesting if Apple do drop their headset soon. That may be the next inflection point. If Facebook changing their name to Meta was the first one, perhaps the Apple headset is the next one.
Well, Luke, you certainly spend more time in the metaverse and these virtual spaces than I do, and probably more than most people I know. I know you own digital real estate, an NFT horse racing stable, and lots of sort of rare digital sneakers. So I'm fascinated by this. So for the skeptics among us, including I think plenty of business leaders, and there's a lot of skepticism out there in the business community, help us make sense of that. Are those just sort of cool things to own? Are they investments? Are they just for show? I mean, should businesses be buying digital assets? Should I be buying digital assets?
Yeah, understandably, a lot of skepticism, and and for good reason as well. Even when there is a big technological shift, as I say, greed comes in, as it always does with these kind of cycles, and we get way ahead of ourselves, and things need to correct and go back to a phase of building actually good things with good utility that people want to use, and that's kind of the phase we're in now after kind of the massive hype. In terms of the investment in the NFT side of stuff, where there's understandably a lot of skepticism. I think it's like any investment, really. You have to spend a lot of time doing deep research, sorting out the wheat from the chaff, of which there is a lot of, understandably and totally agreeable. 95% of it is probably nonsense, at this point. But understanding what assets have significance and potential value, why the creator or the company's story is important and relevant and might have an asymmetric return in a digital first economy, if that's the way that we are seeing this trend go. So some of my bets, so some are for fun, like the horse racing stable thing is a thing called Z Run, where you can own and breed your horse and go race it online. And it's kind of ridiculous, but kind of interesting. And the DNA of each of the horses gets passed down to the child one, and it's mad, but it's fun and interesting and cool. There's a whole art scene as well. So I have something called a chromie squiggle, which if you Google and you look at, you'll think, what is that? But it's has a place in history of generative art on the blockchain, proving the uniqueness and using a certain technique. And it was one of the earliest ones. So like lots of art is disruptive and weird, and people criticize it at the beginning, especially in a big art move. But if it has relevance and historical significance, well, maybe that's a bet. And then we talked about the sneakers and stuff like that, and that's kind of a bet on the culture. There's a company called Artifact, RTFKT as it's stylized, which got acquired by Nike at the end of 2021. And they are really pushing the forefront of all these trends that we talked about, this kind of gaming culture, this people valuing digital assets and sneaker culture, and this kind of new breed of internet culture there. So there's some historical releases there, and Nike were going to move in this space. They had a plan to release something called a Crypto Kicks sneaker. This was all part of what they wanted to do, but kind of Artifact, this company came along, did it first, and so Nike acquired them in the end. And we're starting to see kind of digital sneakers linked to physical ones as well, so you can kind of connect them and see your physical sneakers story through the digital side of stuff as well. So it's these two things coming together. That's kind of where my bets are. They're few and they're concentrated. And yeah, that's my view, is that there's some asymmetric returns here, but as always, all the standards things apply of not financial advice and all the rest of it. But that's kind of my approach on it.
So interesting. So shifting back to business leaders, right? I mean, because I really think they are confused about, this where they sort of are in this point in time. They're being asked about the metaverse. They're probably making decisions about investments in the metaverse, both capital and resources, time, infrastructure. Clearly the metaverse was hot, then it was not. There were some layoffs. There's been some investment, probably not a ton of return so far. So what advice would you give an executive trying to figure this all out?
I think if you really want to get ahead, spending some time, if you can, to understand the technology and how it works at a basic level is really important. Because once you understand what's happening here, and I can give the very quick example of how I explain NFTs to people is generally if you think about a physical item that we all agree is valuable. So if you take the Mona Lisa, for example, as an art piece, and you ask why is that is valuable, and it's kind of valuable for three reasons. The first is that we know who the creator was. Leonardo da Vinci, one of the most famous creators, artists of all time. Like, that story is important there. We also know that that piece is scarce, right? There's only one Mona Lisa that was ever created in the world. And we also know who owns that now in the Louvre in Paris, right? We have kind of three criteria. Therefore, what we agree on, has physical value. Blockchain on a technological level is, for the first time ever, enabled that same criteria in the digital world. So we can now prove who created something, the fact that it's unique and scarce, and track the ownership now. So that's kind of the revolution. The reason why people got so excited about this was like, okay, we can prove value in the digital world. That doesn't mean everything is going to have value, because if your story is not important, then so on. But understanding at a technical level is helpful, I think, because it kind of clicks the pieces, together. I think then go and experience the culture with an open mind. If you can, talk to your kids or young relatives about what they value and why. Why do they want Robux vouchers for their avatar? And through different generations, it might be hard to understand it. It's hard with music moving maybe from physical CDs or cassettes into digital music. Feels like you're not holding it. You don't have anything tangible, but like those shifts happen, right? And it's happening again here as well. So spending a bit of time in the culture and understanding what people value in the space with an open mind, I think, is important. And then think about what your product or your service might look like in a more digital and immersive setting. How can you offer that in a way that doesn't alienate your current customers, but might be exciting and new, and open new avenues in the digital world? And once you've done all of that, then I think you're kind of positioned to make a smart decision about where you fit. I'd say move quickly but thoughtfully, and get educated first. I think it is the way, especially in this phase now. The hype is kind of moved on a little bit, so there's a good time to just get educated now and begin to research and plan.
Yeah, and I think that the danger is thinking perhaps on some levels too far ahead, right? I mean, there are things that could be happening in the short term. Are there short-term business, short-term gains that could be had in the next, 18 months or so, rather than thinking about the metaverse as something that's a decade or, a decade before we see the full impact of 3D and all the sort of various things that come along with that?
Yeah, I think look, we've been through some of the evidence that's there. If your product or service fits in that, and you maybe don't want to go fully deep into the whole blockchain space of releasing your own NFTs, and you need to understand why you would do that. You need to understand that you'd be building a community around this stuff that's tradable. If you're not ready to kind of go there, maybe you dip a toe in the centralized options that are there, these virtual worlds. Maybe do an activation and experiment with it for a few weeks, and see, do you get that engagement back? Has it been helpful? Has it sold product? Whatever it is, and maybe try it there temporarily without going to spend millions by buying land in one of these worlds that's in a very early phase. So I think going to the place where the evidence is to experiment is probably a good thing. And yeah, and if it was me, and I'd be hiring somebody into, or somebody getting somebody into to go through this and through the education and through what's happening and through the culture of the space here, just to make sure it's not running away from you, but you don't have to put all your eggs in your basket and make some outsized bet if you don't fully understand why. I think is the key thing here.
Last one from me. Now I am going to ask you to sort of think a little further out, if you could. Give me your vision of this space, whether we call it Web 4 or Web 5. I don't know what it's going to be called, a decade or more from now. Let's go out 10 years. What do you see in this space or in the metaverse in 2033?
Yeah, huge question, and I think anyone who says they know is lying, because nobody for sure does know. I think we'll probably see the metaverse adopt in a similar way to how we saw the internet adopt the kind of first time rounds, except much faster, because when the internet was adopting, we didn't have the information rails of the internet, right? So we're moving faster, and all the technological shifts are happening in a short amount of time, and AI is going to supersize all of that and make everything, faster than before. Doesn't mean there won't be volatility and get things wrong along the way. But I think it adopts this experience of a more immersive internet and digital assets, and people caring about that more. It's going to adopt, at first with the younger generation and the early adopters who are already here, and that's already happening, and then gradually through the older generations to a lesser extent, exactly like the internet, did now. I do think the dawn of AI can't be overstated. Really, I think my big predictions is that it's not really going to fit into the models of society that we have now. It's probably going to reorganize it in ways that we can't fully imagine yet. I think there'll be a lot of controversy, a lot of misinformation, a lot of volatility, but also loads of positive outcomes that humans are bad at predicting as well. We always jump to the kind of the fear and crave safety with any shift as well. But I think there's a lot of good to come from all of this. That is happening now as well, and those that learn about it and adapt now have the most upside potential for sure. But in time, I think the digital economy will become more valuable than the physical economy because of that scale that we talked about at the beginning. It's just unrivaled, right? You can't possibly recreate that in a physical way. So the scale of digital assets being sent around the world with no physical product needed to ship them or and tradable on an open marketplace all the time. I think that will happen in time. But ultimately, I hope that our digital lives will be richer, more social and immersive. There'll be better experiences. It's not about replacing physical reality. It's about replacing the hours on end of scrolling on a screen on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever you do, replacing that with a richer, more social experience, right? And we've seen the trend towards less unnecessary work travel and less physical goods. That can be a good thing. Hopefully we'll have richer digital lives and hopefully richer physical lives in a more sort of sustainable way as well. Would be where I think it's going. Or AI will destroy us all. So time will tell, but we'll see.
Well, on that note, Luke, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much. This was fun, so enlightening. Thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it. Cheers for having me on, and it's been really fun.
And thank you for listening to the Vision by Protiviti podcast. Please rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And be sure to check out all the metaverse content we have at vision.protiviti.com. And also, you should certainly look in on Luke's podcast, Welcome to the Metaverse. We have a link to it in his intro and bio and in the show notes as well. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.